Wednesday, March 10th, 1943. Dear Kitty, we had a short circuit last evening, and on top of that the guns kept banging away all the time. I still haven't got over my fear of everything connected with shooting and planes, and I creep into Daddy's bed nearly every night for comfort. I know it's very childish, but you don't know what it is like. The AA guns roar so loudly that you can't hear yourself speak. Mrs. Van Daan, the fatalist, was nearly crying and said in a very timid little voice, "Oh, it is so unpleasant. Oh, they are shooting so hard," by which she really means I'm so frightened. It didn't seem nearly so bad by candlelight as in the dark. I was shivering, just as if I had a temperature, and begged Daddy to light the candle again. He was relentless. The light remained off. Suddenly there was a burst of machine gun fire, and that is 10 times worse than guns. Mummy jumped out of bed and, to Pim's annoyance, lit the candle. When he complained, her answer was firm. After all, Anne's not exactly a veteran soldier, and that was the end of it. Have I already told you about Mrs. Van Daan's other fears? I don't think so. If I am to keep you informed of all that happens in the secret annex, you must know about this too. One night Mrs. Van Daan thought she heard burglars in the attic. She heard loud footsteps and was so frightened that she woke her husband. Just at that moment the burglars disappeared, and the only sounds that Mr. Van Daan could hear were the heartbeats of the frightened fatalist herself. Oh, Putty, Mr. Van Daan's nickname, they are sure to have taken the sausages and all our peas and beans. And Peter, I wonder if he is still safely in bed. They certainly won't have stolen Peter. Listen, don't worry and let me go to sleep. But nothing came of that. Mrs. Van Daan was far too nervous to sleep another wink. A few nights after that the whole Van Daan family was woken by ghostly sounds. Peter went up to the attic with a torch and scamper. What do you think it was running away? A swarm of enormous rats. When we knew who the thieves were, we let Muschi sleep in the attic, and the uninvited guests didn't come back again, at least not during the night. Peter went up to the loft a couple of evenings ago to fetch some old newspapers. He had to hold the trapdoor firmly to get down the steps. He put his hand down without looking and went tumbling down the ladder from the sudden shock and pain. Without knowing it, he had put his hand on a large rat, and it had bitten him hard by the time he reached us, as white as a sheet, and with his knees knocking, the blood had soaked through his pajamas. And no wonder. It's not very pleasant to stroke a large rat, and to get bitten into the bargain is really dreadful. Yours, Anne. Friday, March 12th, 1943. Dear Kitty, may I introduce someone to you? Mama Frank, champion of youth. Extra butter for the young, the problems of modern youth. Mummy defends youth in everything, and after a certain amount of squabbling she always gets her way. A bottle of preserved sole has gone bad. Gala dinner for Muschi and Bosch. You haven't met Bosch yet, although she was here before we went into hiding. She is the warehouse and office cat and keeps down the rats in the storerooms. Her odd political name requires an explanation. For some time, the firm had 2 cats, one for the warehouse and one for the attic. Now, it occasionally happened that the 2 cats met, and the result was always a terrific fight. The aggressor was always the warehouse cat, yet it was always the attic cat who managed to win, just like among nations. So, the storehouse cat was named the German, or Bosch, and the attic cat the English, or Tommy. Tommy was got rid of later. We are all entertained by Bosch when we go downstairs. We have eaten so many kidney beans and haricot beans that I can't bear the sight of them anymore. The mere thought of them makes me feel quite sick. Bread is no longer served in the evenings now. Daddy has just said that he doesn't feel in a good mood. His eyes look so sad again, per soul. I can't drag myself away from a book called The Knock at the Door by Anne Budierbacher. The story of the family is exceptionally well written. Apart from that, it is about war, writers, the emancipation of women, and quite honestly, I'm not awfully interested. Horrible air raids on Germany. Mr. Van Daan is in a bad mood, the cause cigarette shortage. Discussions over the question of whether we should, or should not, use our canned vegetables ended in our favor. I can't get into a single pair of shoes anymore except ski boots, which are not much use about the house. A pair of rush sandals costing 6.50 florins lasted me just 1 week, after which they were out of action. Perhaps Meep will scrounge something under the counter. I must cut Daddy's hair. Pern maintains that he will never have another barber after the war, as I do the job so well. If only I didn't snip his ear so often. Yours, Anne. Thursday, March 18th, 1943. Dear Kitty, Turkey is in the war. Great excitement. Waiting in suspense for the news. Yours, Anne. Friday, March 19th, 1943. Dear Kitty. An hour later, joy was followed by disappointment. Turkey is not in the war yet. It was only a cabinet minister taking about them soon giving up their neutrality. A newspaper in the damn superscript one was crying, Turkey on England's side. The newspapers were torn out of his hands. This is how the joyful news reached us too. 500 and 1,000 guilder notes have been declared no longer valid. It is a trap for black marketeers and such like, but even more for people who have got other kinds of black money and for people in hiding. If you wish to hand in a 1,000 guilder note, you must be able to declare and prove exactly how you got it. They may still be used to pay taxes, but only until next week. Dussel has received an old-fashioned foot-operated dentist's drill. I expect he'll soon give me a thorough check-over. The Fischier Alley Germanin has been talking to wounded soldiers. Listening into it was pitiful. Question and answer went something like this. My name is Heinrich Skeppel. Wounded where? Near Stalingrad. What kind of wound? 2 feet frozen off and a broken joint in the left arm. This is exactly what the frightful puppet show on the radio was like. The wounded seemed to be proud of their wounds, the more the better. One of them felt so moved at being able to shake hands with the Führer, that is, if he still had a hand, that he could hardly get the words out of his mouth. Yours, Anne. Thursday, March 25th, 1943. Dear Kitty. Yesterday, Mummy, Daddy, Margot, and I were sitting pleasantly together when suddenly Peter came in and whispered something in Daddy's ear. I heard something about a barrel fallen over in the warehouse and someone fumbling about at the door. Margot had heard it too, but when Daddy and Peter went off immediately, she tried to calm me down a bit, because I was naturally as white as a sheet and very jittery. The 3 of us waited in suspense. A minute or 2 later, Mrs. Van Daan came upstairs. She'd been listening to the wireless in the private office. She told us that Pern had asked her to turn off the wireless and go softly upstairs. But you know what that's like. If you want to be extra quiet, then each step of the old stairs creaks twice as loudly. 5 minutes later, Pim and Peter appeared again, white to the roots of their hair, and told us their experiences. They had hidden themselves under the stairs and waited, with no result at first. But suddenly, yes, I must tell you, they heard 2 loud bumps, just as if 2 doors were banged here in the house. Pim was upstairs in one leap. Peter warned Dussel first, who finally landed upstairs with a lot of fuss and noise. Then we all went up in stockinged feet to the Van Daans on the next floor. Mr. Van Daan had a bad cold and had already gone to bed, so we all drew up closely around his bed and whispered our suspicions to him. Each time Mr. Van Daan coughed loudly, Mrs. Van Daan and I were so scared that we thought we were going to have a fit. That went on until one of us got the bright idea of giving him some codeine, which soothed the cough at once. Again, we waited and waited, but we heard no more, and finally we all came to the conclusion that the thieves had taken to their heels when they heard footsteps in the house, which was otherwise so silent. Now it was unfortunate that the wireless downstairs was still turned to England, and that the chairs were neatly arranged round it. If the door had been forced and the air raid wardens had noticed and warned the police, then the results might have been very unpleasant. So Mr. Van Daan got up and put on his coat and hat and followed Daddy cautiously downstairs. Peter took up the rear, armed with a large hammer in case of emergencies. The ladies upstairs, including Margot and me, waited in suspense until the gentleman reappeared 5 minutes later and told us that all was quiet in the house. We arranged that we would not draw any water or pull the plug in the lavatory. But as the excitement had affected most of our tummies, you can imagine what the atmosphere was like when we had each paid a visit in succession. When something like that happens, heaps of other things seem to come at the same time as now. Number 1 was that the clock at the Westertoren, which I always find so reassuring, did not strike. Number 2 was that, Mr. Vossen having left earlier than usual the previous evening, we didn't know definitely whether Ellie had been able to get hold of the key, and had perhaps forgotten to shut the door. It was still evening, and we were still in a state of uncertainty, although we certainly did feel a bit reassured by the fact that from about 8 o'clock, when the burglar had alarmed the house, until 10:30 we had not heard a sound. On further reflection, it also seemed very unlikely to us that a thief would have forced open a door so early in the evening, while there were still people about in the street. Moreover, one of us got the idea that it was possible that the caretaker of the warehouse next door was still at work since, in the excitement, and with the thin walls, one can easily make a mistake, and what's more, one's imagination can play a big part at such critical moments. So, we all went to bed, but none of us could get to sleep. Daddy as well as Mummy and Mr. Dussel were awake, and without much exaggeration I can say that I hardly slept a wink. This morning the men went downstairs to see whether the outside door was still shut, and everything turned out to be quite safe. We gave everyone a detailed description of the nerve-wracking event. They all made fun of it, but it is easy to laugh at such things afterwards. Ellie was the only one who took us seriously. Yours, Anne. Saturday, March 27th, 1943. Dear Kitty, we have finished our shorthand course. Now we are beginning to practice speed. Aren't we getting clever? I must tell you more about my time-killing subjects. I call them such because we have got nothing else to do but make the days go by as quickly as possible so that the end of our time here comes more quickly. I'm mad on mythology and especially the gods of Greece and Rome. They think here that it is just a passing craze. They've never heard of an adolescent kid of my age being interested in mythology. Well, then, I shall be the first. Mr. Van Daan has a cold, or rather he has a little tickle in his throat. He makes a tremendous fuss about it, gargling with chamomile tea, painting his throat with tincture of myrrh, rubbing eucalyptus all over his chest, nose, teeth, and tongue, and then getting into an evil mood on top of it all. Rauter, one of the German big shots, has made a speech. All Jews must be out of the German-occupied countries before July 1st. Between April 1st and May 1st the province of Utrecht must be cleaned out, as if the Jews were cockroaches. Between May 1st and June 1st the provinces of North and South Holland. These wretched people are sent to filthy slaughterhouses like a herd of sick, neglected cattle. But I won't talk about it, I only get nightmares from such thoughts. One good little piece of news is that the German Department of the Labor Exchange has been set on fire by saboteurs. A few days after, the registrar's office went the same way. Men in German police uniforms gagged the guards and managed to destroy important papers. Yours, Anne.